Nobody knew those would be some of the final moments of her life. She invited an 86 years old woman inside for tea. What happened next shocked an entire village. The woman you're looking at in this footage had no idea she was being seen for the last time. To most people, she was just an elderly village vendor walking through the streets of rural Egypt, carrying butter, cheese, eggs, and dairy products on her head, exactly as she had done for decades. But hidden behind this ordinary scene was a crime so disturbing that it would leave an entire community in shock. Tonight's story is about trust, greed, and the brutal murder of a woman who spent her entire life helping others. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. In Fayoum government at Egypt, October 2021, Khadra was 86 years old. She was a widow, a mother of 6, and one of the most respected women in her village. Most people her age had long since retired, but not Khadra. Every morning before sunrise, she would wake up, head to the local market, buy dairy products, eggs and butter, also traditional rural goods, then spend the day walking from house to house selling them. She refused to become a burden on her children. In fact, despite her age, she often helped them financially instead. People knew her as a kind and generous woman. If someone was struggling, she would often give them products for free. If someone needed help, she would do her best to assist. Nobody could imagine that such a woman would one day become the victim of horrifying murder, and the people responsible were individuals she knew personally. On the morning of October 11, 2021, Khadra's day began like any other. She visited her daughter Samia. She spent time with family. She held with newborn granddaughters. She drank tea. Then she left to continue selling her goods throughout the village. Nobody knew those would be some of the final moments of her life. So she walked through one of the village streets. A woman called out where? That woman was Karima, 55 years old, a neighbor who had known Hajja Khadra for more than 3 decades. Karima lived with her youngest daughter, Dunya, who was preparing for marriage. Their family was struggling financially. After the death of Karima's husband, their situation became increasingly desperate. They had no stable income, no significant assets, and mounting financial pressure. But what Khadra didn't know was that Karima had been thinking about something for quite some time. A pair of gold earrings. Months earlier, Dunya had asked Khadra whether the earrings she wore were real gold. The elderly woman answered honestly, yes, they were real. She even explained that she kept them for a specific reason. If she did one day, she didn't want her children to bear the cost of her funeral or burial. The earrings would cover those expenses. It was a practical decision made by a woman who had spent her life thinking about others. Unfortunately, that honestly would cost her everything. As Khadra approached the house, Karima invited her inside. The old woman initially refused. She told Karima that people were waiting for her and she needed to continue her work. But Karima insisted, come inside, have a cup of tea. It will only take a few minutes. Eventually, Khadra agreed. She stopped through the doorway, and according to investigators, that decision sealed her fate. Inside the house, Dunya sat with the elderly woman and kept her occupied in conversation. Meanwhile, Karima prepared the tea. But investigators later concluded that the tea contained a sedative. After drinking it, Khadra became dizzy. Within a short time, she lost consciousness. Then the attack began. According to court documents and confessions later obtained by investigators, the woman used a heavy wooden object to strike her. Afterward, they suffocated her until she stopped breathing. The motive was simple: money, gold, and greed. Once the murder was complete, panic set in. The body needed to disappear. Security camera footage later showed Dunya leaving the house before returning with a tuk-tuk. Soon afterward, cameras captured Karima and Dunya carrying a large heavy sack from the house. The sack was loaded into the vehicle. The tuk-tuk driver would later tell investigators that the woman claimed it contained a dead animal. They wanted to dispose it. Instead, the sack contained the body of Khadra. The body was eventually dumped into a remote area known locally as Ard al-Mahlak. Then, in one of the most disturbing details of the case, the woman reportedly went shopping afterward, as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, Khadra's family became increasingly worried. She was always punctual, always predictable, always in contact with relatives. When evening arrived and she still hadn't returned home, alarm bells began ringing. Her son Saeed started calling family members. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew where she was. Soon the entire family began searching. Neighbors joined. Shop owners were questioned. Hospitals were checked. Social media posts appeared asking for information. It was as though she had vanished from the face of the earth. Then investigators began reviewing cameras and footages. Camera after camera, street after street. They followed her movement throughout the village. Eventually they reached the crucial recordings. The footage showed Khadra entering Karima's house, but there was one problem. She never come back out. When police questioned Karima, she denied everything. She claimed the elderly woman had only visited briefly, but the evidence continued to grow. More footage surfaced. The tuk-tuk driver came forward. Investigators tracked the stolen gold. Eventually, the case began collapsing around the suspects. Under interrogation, confessions followed. The truth finally emerged. Then came another devastating discovery. Workers cleaning an abandoned area reported an overpowering odor coming from a discarded sack. Inside was a body. The family was called to identify the remains. Their worst fears become reality. It was Khadra. The forensic report found evidence of sedation and concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation. The missing person case instantly became a murder investigation. News of the crime spread rapidly across Fayoum. The entire village was outraged. Many residents couldn't understand how anyone could murder an 86-year-old woman who had spent her life helping others. Tensions escalated. Police presence increased. Public anger continued to grow. The investigation revealed that the stolen jewelry had been sold to a local gold dealer. Authorities recovered important evidence. Additional arrests followed. Prosecutors argued that the crime had been planned in advance rather than committed impulsively. The case was eventually referred to court. On May 21, 2022, the court sentenced Karima to death by hanging. Later on July 18, 2022, Dunya received a prison sentence of 15 years old due to her age at the time of the crime. Others connected to the disposal and handling of evidence also received the prison sentences. For many people in the village, the verdict brought some measure of closure, but nothing could truly undo what had happened. Khadra spent her entire life working honestly. She carried food to people's home. She helped neighbors. She supported her family. And according to those who know her, she even planned ahead so her children wouldn't have to worry about her funeral. Yet the very gold she saved for that purpose becomes a reason she was targeted. A tragic reminder that greed can destroy every human boundary. Until next time, stay safe.